Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomavadhyaptadenaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshyam Om. Sri Krishna Govinda Narayana. So whenever we start a teaching or a text, we always invoke the Lord, the Self, in the form of the lineage. We call it the Guru Shishya Parampara, because this knowledge is handed down from Ishvara, Ishvara 1, the consciousness through to Ishvara, to Maya, through a lineage of, an unbroken lineage of human beings to the present day. And by chanting that with understanding, you put yourself in the position of a devotee of Vedanta, of the truth. Vedanta is the knowledge of reality, what's true, the truth. And the teacher assumes his or her position as the mouthpiece of Ishvara, of the self. So that means you shouldn't see me as a person. If you see me as a person, you're going to have problems with me. Not because there's anything wrong with me as a person, but at least from my point of view, I don't see anything wrong with me as a person. So, and I don't care what you think. I don't care if you like me or you don't like me. It doesn't matter. But you're going to be assuming the position of your likes and dislikes. In other words, you're going to think of yourself as an individual with likes and dislikes, and you'll be making evaluations of what you hear through the filter of your likes and your dislikes, your fears and your desires. So, and that's not good for you. You know, because I'm here as a person because my fears and desires, my likes and dislikes are causing problems for me. If you didn't have a problem with what you want and what you don't want, then you wouldn't be interested in Vedanta. You just wouldn't be here. So the problem is, as you said, the basic practice, let's put it this way, the basic practice of Vedanta, the fundamental practice that you have to participate in if you're going to succeed in this quest for freedom. And this is your duty. When you chant this, then you become, it is incumbent upon you, in other words, you're meant to what? Start the practice of Shravana. Shravana is the basic practice. Now Shravana means listening or hearing. Now that's a discipline. Understand? That's a practice. If you just show up here as an undisciplined person, then you're going to interpret the scripture, and you're going to interpret the way I teach the scripture according to your likes and your dislikes, and then you'll find some things you like about what you hear and some things you don't like about what you hear. And that's entirely the wrong approach. That will not serve you. It's totally unhelpful. Now, you can't help it, that's the problem. The reason it's a discipline is because you can't help judging and evaluating things with reference to what you want and what you don't want, your fears and your desires. You can't help doing that. That you've been doing all your life. Whole life long. That's how you've navigated through life, is what? By interpreting what happens in terms of your conditioning, your likes and your dislikes, what you want and what you don't want. And that produces suffering, i.e., that produces dissatisfaction and unhappiness. So listening to this teaching is a hugely important discipline. That's what a disciple of Vedanta, it's not a disciple of me. I don't have disciples. I'm the self. So for me there are no disciples or gurus. Understand? But to be a disciple means to be a disciplined person. Now, what is that discipline? That discipline is keeping your likes and your dislikes on the shelf when you come in the door. That's why you don't have to do it here, but because there's all the stones out there. But that's why we in our tradition we take off our shoes when we enter the temple or the satsang hall, because it's nothing to do with your feet. It's that feet, you're a symbol of what your feet are, a symbol of your devotion, and you're removing the covering of your devotion, and you're entering the temple with a pure mind. In other words, a mind that's free of likes and dislikes. That's these are extremely important symbols. These are part of the discipline, is what is following these rituals. If you just walk in and throw down your stuff and say, okay, let's have our Vedanta class. I wonder what Ramji's going to say today. I'm always going to say the same thing. Huh? They're always going to hear exactly the same teaching every time. You're not going to get anything new, unless, of course, you're new to Vedanta. Then some of this will be new to you. But none of it will be new, because this is the self speaking through me. And since you're the self, you already know what we're teaching. Even though you don't know that you actually do know what you don't know. So the discipline is called Shravana. Now, you can't do that for a very long time. It takes to build up. So I could teach for hours without stopping, but there's no point, because at a certain point you get overload. You cannot keep your likes and dislikes at bay. Your mind becomes dull or agitated, dull and agitated, and you're no longer hearing. You're no longer listening. I can tell when that's happening. So then I say, okay, let's take a break. Let your mind clear out. Get your go talk or do whatever you have to do to get your mind calm again, or just sit quietly until your mind clears, and then we come back and continue with the topic, or take up the next topic. So that's a first stage of the Vedanta process, and most people don't know how to listen. It's not their fault. It's not your fault. I was before I came to Vedanta, I was in business, and I had all my money on the line all the time. I didn't work for anybody; I worked for myself. So whatever money I had, I was very careful about, and I knew that everybody in that world was a bunch of sharks trying to get my money, and I was like a shark trying to get their money. So I had to listen very carefully to what everybody said, and I had to think about it. That's the next stage. You have to listen to what you hear, and you really got to hear what they're saying. You can't listen to what a person is saying and then interpret it according to what you want or what you don't want, or you're going to have trouble, because you won't actually hear what's there. Then the second stage is called evaluating what you have heard, in other words, what you think, in your likes and dislikes, in light of what you've heard. You shouldn't allow your likes and your dislikes to evaluate the meaning of the words. You should allow the teaching to evaluate the meaning. So what's happening is you're pushing your jiva aside, and you're put in your mind. The jiva is no longer control of your mind. The teaching is meant to be controlling your mind, because the teaching sees reality as it is. This is the knowledge of reality. So if you hear this teaching properly, then you're going to interpret what happens to you according to reality, according to the truth. You will actually see what is, what's actually going on, what's actually being said, and you will be able to then what? Act appropriately on the basis of what's real, not on the basis of your beliefs and opinions. Okay? So now this is the hardest thing to do. It's hard to listen, and it's much harder to what? Surrender those beliefs and opinions that are not what? Serving you or not in harmony with reality, because reality doesn't care what you think or feel. It doesn't care. Ishvara is a totally impersonal factor. And it's indifferent to what you think and feel. It will respond to your actions, but your thoughts and your feelings are just indifferent. So you want to have that big picture. This is the big picture. Vedanta is the big picture that allows you to interpret reality truthfully. This is not a personal teaching. People say, "Oh, I love your teaching, Ramji." Well, it's not my teaching. It's my teaching insofar as I've understood it and can maybe communicate it to you. But it has nothing to do with my teaching. I had to go through this process myself of getting rid of my judgments, my likes and dislikes, my beliefs and opinions, the stuff I picked up in the spiritual world. I picked up all kinds of really dumb ideas in the spiritual world. I had every possible stupid idea stuck in my head that I picked up from living in that spiritual world. I had all of them, and I had to get rid of all of them. And I realized, why, even though in the spiritual world they passed for knowledge, they weren't knowledge at all. When I heard this teaching, I realized that's not knowledge. That's purely opinion. That's purely beliefs. It's just religion, really. Religion is good. We're all for religion. And our religion is karma yoga, bhakti yoga. But what passes for dualistic religion is not real religion. It's belief. And so there's always a problem of separation and anxiety and coming, when you believe something rather than when you know something. When you know something, there's no question about any agitation, because you know it. So the second stage is getting rid of these ideas that you pick up in the spiritual world. And then the third stage is what? Is actualizing that knowledge in light of your daily life. We call it nididhyasana. so that your life actually corresponds to who you really are spiritually. So it's a commitment. So by chanting this, you're committing yourself to, if you do it with meaning. If you just chant it because it's a cool chant and it feels good and it gives you a little momentary samadhi, that's fine too, but that's not really going to solve the problem. You need to understand the significance of what you're chanting and why you're chanting it. Because you're making a commitment to a way of life that's going to actualize your knowledge. We call it self-actualization, or not. Self-realization is gaining the knowledge, and self-actualization is what translating that knowledge into a life, a beautiful life. A life that's free of conflict, a life of service to Ishvara. So, and last night we talked about, and in verse 2, in this text, it mentions Karma Yoga. Not directly, but indirectly it mentions Karma Yoga. Let's see, where's the verse here? I think it's, I've got it here. Oh yeah, verse 2. So in verse number 1 it says, "Salutations to the lotus feet of my Guru Shekarananda, who destroys self-ignorance, the cause of attachment to the belief that the pursuit of happiness through objects can bring lasting peace." In other words, the first qualification is that you understand that objects, i.e. experiences, cannot bring you happiness. They'll bring you temporary pleasure or pain, but they won't bring you lasting happiness. And you understand that, so you've gone to a teacher to get a teaching that will solve the problem. And then and that ties into the second verse. And what's the second verse say? This discussion, unfolding the discrimination between the self and the non-self, is undertaken for the clear understanding of those whose hearts have been purified by service at the feet of the Guru. Now, service at the feet of the Guru doesn't mean James, if you think I'm James. It means service at the feet of the self. So the primary qualification is devotion to what? To the self. And what is that? What would be that devotion to? Devotion to freedom and non-dual love, i.e. freedom and unconditional love, which are synonyms. So, and I mentioned that the development of that devotion is what Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga, that's the fundamental practice, our fundamental practice. Karma Yoga is Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga is devotion to the self. In the form of what? If we teach you the self directly like the Neos do, then we're skipping Ishvara. We're skipping Maya. If you skip any one of these stages, Ishvara is going to send you back to where you belong, to the beginning. I see this happen all the time in Vedanta. People just love the sexy knowledge bits. They just love the teaching, the knowledge. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And they focus on the knowledge, and then they get the knowledge, and they're all self-realized. They, yes, that's right, you're a self-realized person, God bless you, and great, good for you. But later on they discover that their emotional problems start to come back. The emotional stuff is still there. It hasn't been erased by the knowledge. If you were qualified when you heard that, when you got self-realized, if you were qualified, then what? You wouldn't have emotional problems after you heard it. But if once you've heard the teaching, you're still bothered by fear and desire and anger and fantasy and all of these various emotional vrittis or thoughts, those emotional experiences, then it means what? You skip karma yoga because you just fell in love with the teaching because it's so beautiful, and it lifted you out of the samsara for a while. But any moksha, any freedom that comes is going to go, isn't it? Any freedom you gain here in this world that comes is going to disappear one fine day, because freedom's the nature of the self. So moksha or freedom is not something that's going to happen to you. It's something you are. You are free. So karma yoga, he's saying here, you know, the reason he puts it at the beginning, you skip over that. You say, oh yeah, that's very lovely, that's very nice, pure, I'm pure. You think I'm pure, but you don't know what purity is. So then you say, well, let's get into the teaching. Let's get into the teaching. All right, that's very nice. Well, let's get to the teaching. Well, if you skip the meaning of this, if this isn't explained to you, and you don't understand what you're actually doing here, then what? When you hear the teaching, you're going to have to go back and relearn this, or re-qualify. You think you're qualified. You have determined that you're qualified simply because you think you're pure. Everybody's got these fantasies about themselves. Our opinion of ourselves is a lot better than what we actually are. We have a much higher opinion or a lower opinion. It's the same thing. If your opinion is if you have a much worse opinion about who you are, then you got a problem. If you have a much better opinion of what you are, then you also have a problem. They say, well, I'm not pure enough for this, so I better go and do something else. Well, no. The conclusion is you shouldn't do something else because you're not qualified for this. The conclusion you should draw is that I need to purify myself to get qualified. And if you think you're way more spiritual than you are, then you need to what? You need to do some work on that idea. Because it's very easy to just say I'm enlightened, because it's the truth. You are enlightened. But what? But if you're the self, you'd never claim that you were enlightened, would you? And our teaching is you're the self. So if you're the self, you're never going to claim that you're enlightened. How, you know? So these introductory verses are not, you know, they need to be talked about. Now, he said that the basic practice is karma yoga. Well, what is karma yoga? Karma yoga is facing every situation that comes up free of agitation. In other words, not leaving any karma behind. Because normally we're driven by our karma from behind. We want our karma in front of us like a dog on a leash. And that dog should respond to the jerks on the leash about which way it wants to go. But in other words, you should be telling the dog where you want it to go. The dog shouldn't be dragging you along. I had a girlfriend once that had a big German Shepherd, and she had no control over that dog. And she actually dislocated her shoulder and had expensive things because this dog was just totally undisciplined. And I told her, I'll get that dog under control, don't worry. She wouldn't, that finished our relationship. Actually, because I couldn't stand it. It wasn't good for the dog and it wasn't good for her, and she was so identified with that dog because it was just a symbol of her desires that she didn't want to, like, you know, put the dog under control. I grew up with dogs. We had hunting dogs. We hunted. So we knew how to discipline dogs, and the dog loved us. Your mind will love you if you discipline your mind. Your ego will love you, honestly. You don't think so. No. You feel, oh, no, I got to give it everything it wants. I just have to feed it. It's a big hungry mouth. Keep throwing food in it. No. You know, children and dogs, and yet that part of your mind that's like childish and animal-like, that needs to be controlled, restrained. We call it Yoga Rudra in Vedanta. It's holding the reins. Krishna has Arjuna has Krishna holding the reins of those 5 horses. You know that image? Where Krishna's in the battlefield, and they're going through the battlefield and they're fighting. And who's holding the reins? Not Arjuna, Krishna. Krishna means the knowledge. The knowledge is actually controlling those animals, the animal urges that are just rushing forward into battle, into the war of life. It's a symbol, a beautiful symbol of the situation. So karma yoga is what? Cleaning your karma as you go. By what? By worshiping the field of life. Life is the battlefield. And what is that worship? Offering your actions to the field. Now what does that mean? Worship is offering. Prayer is begging. Prayer is give me something. Worship is I've got something to give you. Now, I give you what? Give you means what? The animals and plants don't care about it. They just take whatever comes, because they don't have likes and dislikes. But we're in the field of human beings. We're human beings, and we all have connection to human beings. So there's always human beings in our lives, isn't it? So what I want my actions to leave you plenty of room to be happy. I mean, obviously some pain is unavoidable through any actions, no matter how pure your intention is and how efficient you are in acting. In other words, what an efficient karma yogi you are. There are going to be some disruptions in the field. That's inevitable. But the karma yogi's basic idea is that I don't want to injure or cause any kind of problems for anybody else. Because why? It's one, it's good for everybody else, and it's also good for me. Why? In other words, as the Dalai Lama, I heard him give a talk one time, and he said it's not that we're do-gooders. It's just that we know that what if we don't do good, we're going to get bad karma back, and so we're also looking after ourselves by doing good. Because if you don't think of the other person. My father was a great karma yoga. He always said, think of the next person when you do anything. In other words, what are the consequences are going to action be for what? Whoever comes behind you. And he taught my brother and I that from knee high, when we were just kids. And that was the principle my mother and my father operated by, was what? Serving what? The world. They didn't know about, they didn't believe in God, but it didn't matter because they actually worshiped God practically, in a practical way, by what? By thinking of what comes, what's coming after. So in that way, what happens? Whatever desires you have get sublimated into that practice of karma yoga, and removed and turned into fears and desires. Those become a positive force, and they push you along, pull you along, or push you along spiritually. So you sublimate or convert those fears and desires into a positive emotional force. That's called bhakti. That takes you right through life. And you feel happy. Because every action you do removes a vasana. It doesn't add another vasana to it. Whereas if you're unconscious and your fears and desires are operating, then everything you do is just going to reinforce your existing ignorance structure. Your vasanas are your ignorance structure. You know, we were talking about the toilets. Toilets is a good example. You know, it's really funny about people. It's really funny. When you take a poop, do you actually think about where the poop goes? You actually, in your mind, trace this poop, because when you're pooping, you're offering something valuable into the world, aren't you? Isn't it? Your shit is a valuable substance. Because what? The life that comes after you depends upon it. Everything we eat was shit yesterday. You know, I know you don't think about it because you got this really negative view about shit. If there's something wrong with it, and I just flush the toilet and get up and run out. I'm not interested in what happens when I get rid of my shit. I don't care. Right? Isn't that right? The scatology is a great science. You should actually stop and look and see what you're pooping out and have a look at it and see, you know, because you can tell so much from your shit. It's a very valuable knowledge to have. Scatology, it'll tell you what, you know, how to eat and what not to eat and so forth and so on. It'll connect an action and results very nicely for you. But no, it's bad. It stinks, it's a waste, I should get rid of it, I just flush the toilet and walk out. And most people don't, you know, next to these toilets here, this is a specific teaching now for this seminar. in case you didn't get that, there's a little stick right next to the toilet. So your practice is to what? Grab that, have a look in there, see what's there, and clean up the shit before you leave, okay? Flush the toilet again if you have to, but leave for the next person. Because the next person has to come in. Do you like to walk into a toilet and see the shitty toilet like India? In India, you don't even want to go into a toilet, do you? It's just better to go shit in the field, which is what the Indians do, because the toilets are disgusting because the Indians don't clean their shit. They just throw it away and just walk away and leave it for everybody else. I mean, I was on an airplane once, and everybody's dressed in saris, and the women jewelry, and men in suits, and all that sort of thing. I went to the bathroom, and I said, Jesus Christ, I better hold it. I can't go into this bathroom, the toilet. So karma yoga is what again offering. When you're making an offering, what are you doing? You're worshiping God, and and God is everything. So you want to worship them, you want to give the next person a pleasant experience, don't you? You don't want the next person that comes along as a result. And it isn't just about shit, it's about everything. It's about your whole way of life. Karma yoga is a way of life that what? Is thinking about Ishvara. Ishvara means what? The field in which you worshiping the situation in which you find yourself. Ishvara is just your environment. We went to a lot of trouble to make this a pleasant environment for the satsang. Now you could have come and we could have left the olive meal here and all the dirty walls and the stains and all that sort of thing, but you know, I had to go into debt, and we put in a lot of time and a lot of money, and people came and helped us and to make this environment beautiful so we could sit here today in a lovely, beautiful sattvic environment, and you could, you know, appreciate or hear these teachings in a beautiful, because we, you know, love the truth, and we love, you know, we love this knowledge, and we want to serve human beings. So there's all, you know, karma yogis are thinking ahead. They're planners. They're calculators. They're manipulators. They're manipulating and calculating and planning environments so that the world benefits from it. And what does that do? See what? And social service is called social service. That's one of the rituals of Karma Yoga. There are 5 Karma Yoga rituals. And social service, what does it do? It gives away your shit. It doesn't add shit. And it converts your shit into a positive devotional force. Beautiful. Well, once you get that secret, you don't need to worry about jnana yoga and all that. The knowledge will just come. It will just be automatic. That's why Krishna says in there, no, you don't have to worry about it. Just do karma yoga. The knowledge will come to you. But if you don't do the karma yoga properly, then when you'll get the knowledge and you understand I'm awareness, and it'll be a high for you. It will give you some kind of distance on your problems, but your problems will still persist. And even if you're okay with your problems, other people are not okay with your problems. And so you can't say, well, that's their problem. Why? Because that means you have a dualistic notion, doesn't it? That means you haven't actually realized what non-duality is, because what? You're allowing yourself in the form of other people to have problems. You know, you're not doing what is best for the world, for other people. And you want to do that. Why? Because you're intimately dependent upon everybody for everything that you get, aren't you? So I need to, this is a discipline. Karma Yoga is a discipline. It's the controlling your actions, your speech and your actions and your thoughts and your feelings, and what? Gaining control, mastery of them. Then what? It's very easy to understand this teaching. It's a simple thing, but it's not easy. All of Vedanta is very simple, it's very straightforward, it's very basic. Like I was telling you last night when we were talking about, emotional problems, because this is where the whole thing starts, is with suffering. I have emotional issues, and that at its core, every human being has exactly the same problem. They're bedeviled, they're bothered by what? Their desires and their fears. And what? In other words, all my emotional issues are what? The result of not getting what I want. You can't blame the government. You can't, Donald Trump is not your problem. You guys don't, you're not Americans. Well, we got one or two Americans here, but and the government is not your problem. It's not making life difficult for you. The church is not, the Pope and those pedophile priests, they're not your problem either. Your mom and your pop are not your problem. Nobody's bothering you. What's bothering you is you're not getting what you want. You're dissatisfied. That's all. If you were satisfied, you wouldn't be interested in, you wouldn't be doing anything, you wouldn't be or you'd be doing everything happily. But you think what? The world has to change, or I have to change to what? To be satisfied with myself. That's what you think. I either want the world to change to make my life better, or I want me to change to make my life better. And neither one of those things are going to solve the problem. Because underneath that desire to change is what? The wrong idea you have about who you are. And what is that wrong idea? That I am a wanting being. That's the wrong idea. That I am somebody with wants and fears. There's nobody, Karma Yoga says this, nobody, right, decided to want what they want or fear what they fear. You come in with fears and desires. You're born here. with those fears and desires. In other words, ignorance caused those problems, not you. You didn't, when you were, before you were born here, before you appeared here as a person, does anybody recall anybody asking God or anybody else asking you, oh, by the way, when you come here, what do you want? And what do you want to be afraid of? Because when you come here, you're going to be afraid of certain things, and you're going to, want certain other things. So what was it that you would like, and what is it that you don't want? Please tell me. Does anybody ever recall having that conversation with anybody? No, you don't, because you never had that conversation, because you appeared here one fine day with this ignorance, with this idea, I am a needy, wanting, fearful being. It's nobody's fault. You can't blame yourself for it. You can't blame your mom for it, or your pop for it, even though they're the ones who Ishwara used to to teach you the ignorance. I know, it was all for love. They loved you very much, but they weren't really doing you any favors. Well, they were sort of doing you a favor in light of the ignorant world in which you appear. They were telling you, keep your butt covered, right, and go for it as much as you can to get what you want, because you need to have all this stuff to survive here. But this is a setup. Ignorance set this whole thing up, and we're victims. But we can't think of ourselves as victims and feel bad about it and get ourselves. We just have to do what we can do to take care of the problem. So I have to see, karma yoga is like seeing that my fears and desires, my unexamined fears and desires are not going to satisfy, are not going to work for me. And those fears and desires should be sublimated into this pursuit. In other words, I should want the right thing, which is what? Freedom. And I should fear the right thing, which is what? Ignorance. So I should know what knowledge is, and I should know what ignorance is, and then I'm good to go. You can't get rid of your fears, you can't get rid of your desires, but you can understand what they are and use those or channel those fears and desires in the right direction, and that will set you free of what? Of your fears and your desires. So in this second verse, he said, what does he say? He says, this discrimination between what is true and what isn't, in other words, between knowledge and ignorance, is between the self and the non-self. What is the purpose of why are we discriminating? Because he says, for the clear understanding of those whose hearts have been purified by service at the feet of the Guru, at the teaching. And the fundamental basic teaching is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga. Upasana Yoga is the disciplines that prepare your mind. And Jnana Yoga is what? The knowledge that that removes your ignorance. So all of that is presupposed when we enter this text. That's why I said last night, this was written for sannyasis. He was the head of a mott. Only in those monasteries, only sannyasis live there. On certain days, at certain times and evenings for pujas and stuff, they allow the public to come in and participate in the pujas, because they're the worships and the rituals, because they're suitable for householders. But the people staying in these, and he was the guru's guru. He was the big cheese there in this monastery in Western India. Was all for sannyasis, and these were people who had already had the Karma Yoga attitude, and whose likes and dislikes were already being managed. So this is why we say this is an advanced text. And normally, you know, we don't teach it to beginning people. It's okay. As long as you understand what's going on, it's okay to teach it to anybody. I'm quite unusual in the tradition insofar as I think people are a lot more advanced than they actually are. Which is very good because it inspires people, it gives them the confidence to tackle this. I don't feel you should have to wait 30 years in an ashram and learn all this shit to get to know who you are. I think you can do it in a reasonable period of time because, you know, the self is in you, and if the self is properly motivated, it will take you there rather quickly. Now, obviously there are, you know, qualifications to that statement, but you know, I trust that you want, that, you know, you're intelligent and that you want this, and then it's very simple, actually. It's very straightforward. Whereas in the old system, you know, they just spoon-fed you little by little. There's, you know, there's anyway, I won't get onto it, because as soon as I criticize some other tradition, I get hate mail. So, okay, so now the text begins, so what point? The first point is, what is it that I need to know? Well, this is Jnana Yoga. Vedanta is Jnana Yoga. Actually, Karma Yoga is not really Vedanta. Karma Yoga is yoga. Yoga is yoga, and Vedanta is Vedanta. Yoga means practice for doers. So yoga addresses the part of you that's a doer, the doer part. Everybody's got a doer part, and everybody's got a knower part. Don't think, well, I'm a doer or a knower. No, you're a doer and a knower. So Karma Yoga is for the doer part of you, and what? And Jnana Yoga or Vedanta is for the knower part of you. So actually, Yoga and Vedanta are two separate but interrelated disciplines. Why? Because you can't know unless you're what? Purified. And you can't get purified unless you do something. So, and that purification should be led by knowledge. In other words, it should be determined by what? By the scripture, not by what you think is pure. You know, people want, the reason I get criticized is because I don't act like a saint. The people think that enlightened people have to be saints, but a saint isn't necessarily enlightened. And an enlightened person isn't necessarily a saint, although they may be. You can be a saint. You can be a saint and be enlightened, or you can be enlightened and be a saint, or you can be one or the other. Either way. So we need to know the difference between action and what? Knowledge. Always. In our tradition, there's only these two paths, the path of action and the path of knowledge. There's no third path or fourth path or so forth and so on. I have an article on the website called What is Advaita Vedanta, where I dismiss the multi-path confusion. There's this confusion that there's all these different paths and that all roads lead to Rome, and that's your... you know, that you can do it by Christianity, and you can do it by Buddhism, and you can do it by this and by that, and Hatha Yoga, and different Bhakti Yoga, and you can choose whatever path you want, and you're all going to get there. Well, no, you're not. You're just going to get confused. Because there's only two paths, because that's the way human beings are set up. This is the duality. There's action, and there's knowledge. And that's it. So this is a very simple teaching that cuts away all of this confusion. You've got a doer part, you've got a knower part. What's the relationship between the part of you that does things and the part of you that knows things? And how are they, you know, what is their relationship we're talking about here? So the teaching begins with an analysis of the three states of consciousness. That's the chart in the back. I'm not going to bring it over because I'm not going to give you that whole teaching. That's the Mandukya and the Karika. The Mandukya is one thing. That's the Upanishad. It's 12 verses. And the Karika is what? 4 chapters on the 12 verses by Gaudapada. That's a whole other teaching altogether. Okay? But we're using that, we're taking a snippet from that teaching, one of the basic ideas in that teaching, to help you get it clear what the self is. Okay? So, and it says, and you know, it's typical of Vedanta, we start right from the beginning, and every idea is based upon the previous idea. So you need to understand that if there's 5 ideas in a teaching, you won't get the final understanding unless you've what? Understood 2, 3, and 4. Although sometimes you can reason incorrectly and still come to the right conclusion, but that doesn't really help you. You need to have the right sequence or right understanding, the right logic to get to that conclusion, and then you're confident in your knowledge. And all we're talking is what? Being confident in what you know about who you are. So he says here, he's there, verse 3, he says, the objects of sense knowledge, what are these objects of sense knowledge? Here it is on the chart. Space, air, fire, water, and earth. It's your material elements. And what? And the objects, what are these objects? What is these objects? These objects are known by what? By the senses. These are what? The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin are what? Are organs in the subtle body that what? That give consciousness, you, knowledge of the material world. Okay? You can't, consciousness doesn't know directly the material world. From your point of view, from consciousness's point of view, you don't see the material world. You only see the material world through what? Through the mind, where the what? Where these organs are situated. So your light shines on the mind, and the mind shines on the senses, and the senses illumine the material world. It works. It's a structure. This is the basic structure of existence. It's true for everybody. Nobody's different. Every human being is built. This is a picture of how human beings are. Okay. So it says here, the objects of sense, right? Now the objects are not actually what? The elements. What are you actually seeing? It says here, sound, sight, taste, touch, and smell. Because every object what has a property. The property of space is sound, right? And so on. The property of earth is smell. The property of fire is light, and so forth and so on. So you don't actually see the elements, you see the qualities of the elements. The properties or the qualities of the elements are seen by what? By these 5 senses. So what does it say here? The object of sense knowledge, sound, sight, taste, touch, and smell, that are perceived in the waking state have different properties. But, understand now, this is the first stage of the logic. But the consciousness, awareness, you can use awareness if you like, consciousness or awareness. But the consciousness or awareness of these is one. Now, what does that mean? That means there's not a different knower for each one of these properties. Smell, sight, touch, so forth and so on. The knower is the one, it's the same on all three. The what? The properties are different and the elements are different, but the one that knows them is not different. It's the same one that knows all of them. Okay? Now then what? What is the qualification for this knowledge? In what? The waking state. Human beings only have three states. There's no fourth state. It's redundant. Don't tell me there's a fourth, fifth, or sixth, or seventh, or 10th, or an infinite number of states. That's all nonsense. There's only three states: waking, dream, and deep sleep. And there are various modifications in the waking and dream state that make it look like there's different states, but there are not. There's only these three states. So what? So in the waking state, the awareness of the different perceptions and feelings and so forth that you have is the same. But the perceptions, the properties, the things that you're perceiving or experiencing are different. Then he takes up the next state, the dream state. So in the dream state, the perceived objects are transient. I had an amazing dream the night before last. Oh my God, it was the most amazing dream I've ever had. I think it made, I just couldn't begin to tell you. And I experienced I don't know how long it lasted. It couldn't have lasted more than a second or two. But in the dream, it lasted forever. And I knew everything. I mean, you can't believe the things that happened in that time. It says, in the dream state, the perceived objects are transient. They come very quickly, don't they? Your experience is just... Right? In the waking state, they seem permanent, don't they? Like this, in the waking state, this wall seems permanent, doesn't it? In the dream state, if there's a wall, how long does the wall last? If you see a wall in the dream state, how long does that last?
A second?
Yeah, who knows even know if it's a second. A second's a long time. Actually, I've been watching the NBA basketball playoffs, and when you get down to like 9 seconds, there's still the opportunity for what? For a lot of things to happen in 9 seconds in a game of total Rogers. And nobody relaxes if there's 9 seconds, if the game is tied or if the game is close. Because in 9 seconds, a lot can happen. So in a dream, how long does the wall last? Now the wall's been sitting here, what? For the last hour, hasn't it? So we're assuming this is a pretty permanent wall, huh? This is a real wall. Why? Because it lasted for an hour. Well, actually, when you get down on the, we're going to have a break in a couple of minutes. When you're down there drinking your tea and coffee and chatting in front of the pool in Club Med, our little club meditation, there won't be a wall, will there? This wall will not be there, will it? You won't be thinking of the wall at all, will you? But while you're here, probably while you're listening, you didn't think of the wall either. You're thinking of the wall when you're thinking of the wall. In other words, actually the wall is actually just a thought of a wall. It's not actually a wall. But never mind that. The Upanishad, the Manduka gets into this in detail. But the point is that what? The awareness of the objects in the what? In the waking state, in the dream state, is the same, even though the objects appear in, many objects can appear in a second. The awareness of them, in other words, thousands of objects can appear in a second. in the dream state, whereas, you know, they're very, very slow, they're persistent in the waking state. They seem to exist for a long time in the waking state. The awareness of the objects in the dream and the awareness of the objects in the waking state is the same. There's no difference. The awareness is not different. It's not specific to the state. In other words, the awareness is independent of the state. It's the same. That's the logic here. That's just a fact. Now, it may be a belief for you, and if you don't understand that, if you can't see that in your own experience, then you have to think about it until it's clear to you. And if you can't figure it out, then just take the Scripture's word for it, and that will solve your problem. Because the Scripture's this is not an opinion. This is just a science. So if they say E equals MC squared, and you say, I don't understand it, you know, therefore it can't be, you know, it's not real, or it can't be true, or I can't believe it. No, it's true, it's just science. So this is a spiritual science, and this is about what? Consciousness, this science of consciousness. And so if the Scripture says it, you can take its word for it. Because you're not going to get to what? To the self by doing anything, are you? You're not going to get free by doing anything, are you? You either understand that you're already free, or what? Or you don't. See, there's no actions that are going to produce freedom. So he says here. So now, what's the next step in this teaching, in this logic? He says, waking up from deep sleep. When you wake up from deep sleep, let's see if this isn't true for you. You have to establish the truth of this in your own experience. Because what? Vedanta is just an analysis of your experience. Well, this is not your idea of what experience is. This is Vedanta's idea of what experience is. And it so happens that it's been corroborated for centuries, so we can trust this knowledge. So it says here, waking up from deep sleep, one consciously, what do you remember? One consciously remembers a lack of the perception of objects. Isn't that right? That's why you say, nothing happened in deep sleep, don't you? When I say, well, what happened in deep sleep? You say, well, nothing happened. Is that correct? Does anybody disagree with that? Yeah, it's just, you know nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. Duh. It's not profound, right? He said, now listen to this. Because one only remembers previous experienced objects, it's clear that deep sleep, a lack of knowledge of objects is experienced. In other words, the object that you're experiencing in deep sleep is lack of knowledge. What is lack of knowledge? Ignorance. You experience ignorance in deep sleep. That's why you say, I didn't know anything and nothing happened. Because the experience was what? Ignorance. Now, okay, now then, right? Anybody argue so far? Remember, you're signing on to this, you're going to have to accept the conclusion. I want an argument, because if there's an argument, I'll knock down your argument, but I'm happy to knock it down. But nobody can argue. Why? Because this is just a fact. If it weren't a fact, then you could argue and then we could have a discussion, and you could say I'm wrong and you're right, or you're right and I'm wrong, whatever. But you can't argue because it's just a fact. So what does it says? Number 6, ignorance of objects is the object of awareness in deep sleep. Then finally, the awareness of the objects in the waking and dream and the awareness of the lack of objects in deep sleep is the same. So if what? If awareness is my nature, if I am awareness, then I'm awareness when I'm asleep also, aren't I? I'm awareness when I'm awake, I'm awareness when I'm dreaming, and I'm awareness when I'm sleeping. Which means what? I'm not a waker or a dreamer or a deep sleeper, am I? Isn't that right? Huh? Because what have I just done there? What's the logic? We call it anvaya vyatireka. And it means elimination of the non-essential attributes. Now, what are non-essential attributes in this situation? What are the? There are three non-essential attributes: the waking, dream, and deep sleep. All of those waking, dream, and deep sleep, the waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper, can all be dismissed. Why? Because they're non-essential. That is, they're not essential or necessary for each state. What are, so what is it that you can't dismiss?
Awareness.
Yeah. Awareness. So if you say I'm not there when you're asleep, is that true? No. If what? I mean, this depends upon what? If you are awareness. And which is what Vedanta says. Vedanta says you're awareness. Now, you're right when you say, I'm not there in deep sleep, if you refer to the waking state entity. Isn't that right? That's true, isn't it? Huh? Because the waking state entity is not present in awareness, is it? I mean, in deep sleep, excuse me. Sorry. The waking state, the waker and the dreamer are not present in the deep sleep state, are they? Because you don't see any... So that's true. If you're a waker or a dreamer, you're not present in the deep sleep. That's true. But what? If you're awareness, then you're present in the deep sleep, aren't you? Because how can you have... Now here's the principle. Nothing exists unless it is known to exist. Tell me, tell me something that doesn't exist. Is there such a thing as non? What doesn't exist? Nobody's arguing that you're right. You can't, and you guys are smart. Or maybe you're real stupid. I don't know, but but as soon as you tell me there's something that doesn't exist, that exists, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Well, what about something like dragons? I mean, they exist in your mind.
Okay, but so they have an existence factor, don't they?
Yeah.
They don't have there's no correspondent physical object, but now this is an important point that Vidya brings up. When you're experiencing a chair, are you actually experiencing the chair? Or a wall? Or are you actually experiencing it? Where, in other words, what is the location of your experience of objects?
In awareness.
In awareness. So you now and how is this chair getting into awareness? How is this chair getting into the self? Because the customs here between awareness and this world is very strict. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man entered the kingdom of heaven, it says in the Bible. That means you can't take anything from this world of objects and put it in awareness. So how then does the chair exist in awareness?
Through the senses?
Yes, but no.
Change it around and say, how can I?
It exists as a thought that appears in awareness, not inside awareness, that presents itself to awareness. Because awareness can't, we said here, awareness can't experience any material objects without the help of the senses. The senses are in the mind, and the mind what? So when you're experiencing a chair, you're experiencing not the chair, you're experiencing the thought of a chair, aren't you? That thought is never penetrating inside of you, awareness. What? It appears as an object to you, but it doesn't enter into you and become part of you, or it doesn't come out of you. There's an independent factor called Maya that's generating this thought, this chair thought. So you never actually see the physical object, you only see the thought of the object. But because of Maya, you think you're actually seeing a chair, but you're never seeing a chair, you're seeing only the thought of a chair. Like, where's your wife or your kids or your dog or whatever it is when you're not thinking of your wife or your kids or your dog? Where are they? Do they exist for you? Even when they exist for you, do they think they're your wife or your kids? Does your dog think he's your dog? My wife told me, I said, I was introducing her once when I first met to some friends. I said, this is my wife, Sundari. And she was very polite. She didn't say anything until we got home. She said, how dare you? I am not your wife. So obviously, she obviously didn't think she was my wife. She was my wife in my mind. I knew she wasn't my wife anyway, but in a social situation I couldn't say, this is myself. These were family friends and people I knew, So I can't be, talking Vedanta to them. They just think that's pretentious and foolish and silly, So I, just obeyed the convention and said, this is my wife. But I could see my wife she didn't think that she was my wife. She thought she was herself. So I didn't have a wife, did I? I had a wife, I had the wife thought, and the wife thought I thought corresponded to a physical object like a dragon. If you have a dragon thought, you're just experiencing a dragon, but you never experience a dragon's body when you experience a dragon, do you? Let's say there was dragons. Or mountain, let's take a mountain instead of a dragon. Now, when you go down here to Mount Maroma, at the end there's this big mountain, beautiful mountain called Mount Maroma. When you're standing on Mount Maroma, are you actually experiencing Mount Maroma? What are you experiencing there? You're experiencing the thought that I'm standing on Mount Maroma. You're not experiencing Mount Maroma because you can't get into Mount Maroma. You can't get into these elements here because these elements are purely conceptual. Mountain is purely a concept. There's only consciousness. There's no mountain per se. Mountain is a concept, a name and a form that's superimposed upon yourself that appears to be solid and real and appears to be outside of yourself. If you actually think that you own that person, that it's my wife or my kids or my dog, you're going to have a problem, aren't you? Whereas people who know this have no sense of I and mine. Because what? You didn't create the wife, you didn't create the kids, you didn't create the dog, you didn't create the house. What actually did you create? Can you tell me one thing? If you create something, then you can say, I can own it. If you authored something, like if I write a book, I can say I wrote the book. So I can say it's my book. Isn't that right? But tell me what it is that you created. Either as the self, you know the self can't create. The self is, you can't create something the self can't create because it's not a doer. And the jiva, the individual people, what did you create? You can't name one thing that you actually created. So, what belongs to you? Where's your wife, or your kids, or your dog, or your cat, or your food, or your body, or your whatever, money, or whatever? Where is it? It's purely conceptual. It's not actual. But conceptual, and it's not real. That means what? It's only present when you're thinking about it. When you're not thinking about it, it's not present anymore. Now that can't be the definition for reality, can it? If that's what worldly people think, isn't it? They think it's only present when it's theirs when it's present and when it's absent. But no, it's not. It's not yours whether it's present or absent. It's purely conceptual. It's purely a thought in your mind that you own this, or that you created this, or this belongs to you, or whatever it is. Because there's this other factor there that's what generating this world. This is what we call the Maya factor. So it says awareness, and so what? And then the final verse, we'll take a break next. Awareness is unchanging throughout all cycles of time, past, present, future. This we talked about, Richard, last night, is that there's some fact. If you understand this, then there's no reincarnation, obviously. The reincarnation is just purely conceptual. There's no actual. It says, awareness is unchanging throughout all cycles of time, past, present, and future. Unlike the sun, and the sun here is an example of any thought or any object. Because where's the sun when you're not thinking about the sun? For you. There's no sun. Nobody had the sun thought till I read the word sun, did they? Was anybody thinking about the sun before I read the sun thought? No, nobody was thinking about it. Why? So there wasn't any sun for you, was there? Until we had the sun thought. Then suddenly what? Sun knowledge came into your mind, and then the sun existed for you. But when we move on to the next word, awareness, the sun thought disappears and what? Awareness thought appears, doesn't it? So what? Unlike the sun, awareness does not rise or set. Sun being a symbol of all the objects that present themselves to you, consciousness or awareness. And then what? Okay, here's the kicker. Now he's talking about awareness, about you. This is awareness means you. In Vedanta, when we say you, we mean awareness. Now sometimes you'll get confused because sometimes we're talking about the jiva, in other words, an object called the jiva, James or Sally or Pete or Mary or Mark or whatever your name is. Sometimes we refer to that person as you, but that person is an object, just like the sun or the moon or the stars. It has the same degree of reality as a physical object. That person only exists when you're thinking about that person. And you're not always thinking about yourself, are you? I mean the person that you think you are. Anyway, so it says, unlike the sun, awareness that writer said. And what about that person, that awareness? We're not going to call it person. Or they do call it the universal person or the supreme person. They also personify this. But that's why I put it, and the text really says it. It, awareness, it's not a person, is never born. So what? So you didn't come into existence, did you? As a person. And you didn't come into existence as awareness either, did you? Because you were already awareness. You were never not existence, awareness. and what, consequently, if you were never born, then what? It does not die. You don't die, do you? Now, if that's true, then all your problems are solved, aren't they? And all problems are solved. If that's true and you understand that, you appreciate that, why are all problems solved? Because all problems are only worried about what? Fear of non-existence. We're doing all these things, what? To keep ourselves experiencing ourselves. But you can't experience yourself because you are yourself. So you always exist. Only your body, what, comes and goes. And your body comes and goes depending on when you think about it. When are you, when you're not thinking about your body, where's your body? It's purely conceptual. So he says, you, we're taking it in it as an object, and we're saying it, you, that's what non-duality means. It, you, there's the same, it doesn't die. And what's the third factor about that? What's the third fact about that, about yourself? It's self-revealing. Now what does that mean? It is simple. It's so simple nobody thinks about it. And so they think they're going to experience themselves, but later on, when they get knowledge, then they're going to experience themselves. I'm going to get enlightened, and I'm going to be experiencing the self. Direct path. You're going to experience non-duality. No, you're not going to experience non-duality. You're already non-dual. So what is it? It's self-revealing. Now, this is a simple teaching. Answer this question. I don't think you can answer this question in the affirmative. In other words, I don't think you can say yes to this question. If you can, then there's something, your brain isn't working right. Did anyone ever tell you you exist? Huh?
No.
No. Nobody said yes. Yeah. Nobody ever says yes. Why not?
Self-evident.
Yeah, it's self-evident, it's obvious. Nobody has to tell you. Do they? Did anyone ever tell you you were conscious? Like in the hospital, when you come out of a coma, they don't tell you that you're conscious. They tell your relatives that, oh, he's conscious now. But they don't tell you because they don't have to tell you you're conscious because it's self-evident that you're conscious, isn't it? It's obvious. So nobody has to tell you that you exist, and nobody has to tell you that you're conscious. What? Because everybody knows this fact. Except they don't know what it means. They know the fact, but they don't know what it means in terms of what? In terms of the objects that present themselves to it. In other words, in terms of their bodies and minds and the world around them. They don't know what it means. In other words, they're unable to interpret this fact in such a way that what? That it sets them free of the problems that come in the world, in samsara. If you, this is why Vedanta is going to set you free, because it's going to show you how to interpret something that you already know in terms of something that's not real. So you can live in an unreal world and be happy. Whereas we don't know how to live in this unreal world and be happy, because we're taking an unreal thing to be a real thing. And it's not real at all. It's just transient. It just comes and goes. It's never the same from one second to the next, is it? So how are you going to determine, say you fall in love with somebody. Does your anxiety go away? No. your anxiety comes the moment you fall in love. Why? Because you know that that object that you're in love with may not be the same tomorrow or in 5 minutes. All you have to do is step on one of their dislikes and they don't love you anymore. Huh? You break, huh? Just say the wrong thing in the wrong tone and their love switches off right away and they don't like you anymore. And then you have to do a whole lot of things to get them back to like you again. You have to say a whole lot of bullshit to make them believe that you love them. So now what did we do there? Well, we just simply analyzed our own experience of these three states with the help of the scripture, and we come to the conclusion that what? We're unborn, we're immortal. So if I can own my consciousness as awareness, and the only way I can own it is by understanding it. If I can understand it, I can own it. And if I can own it, all my worries stop and my samsara disappears. In other words, I'm happy. I'm free, I'm happy. Nothing can what? Be taken away from me. This is what I know. Nothing can be taken away from me, and nothing can be added to me. That's what the self means. That's what immortal means. That's what awareness means. That's what existence means. There's not two existences. If there were two existences, then maybe something from one existence could, destroy something in this existence. There would be a possibility, wouldn't there? Or that second existence could steal something from this existence and diminish existence. But there's not anything other than existence than you, ever, to what? To take something away from you. And there's not any other existence that can add anything to you to make you better, to give you more than you have. Can you get more than your existence? Is there any way to enhance your existence? No. There's no way. Because existence, there's not two existences, so you can't, maybe the existence 2 is better than existence 1, and I only know about existence 1, so if I could find out about existence 2, I could add it to me, and then I'd have existence 1 and existence 2, I'd have twice as much as I had before. But there's not two existences, so how am I going to gain anything? So, the buck stops here with me. It starts with me and it stops with me. There's no gain or loss for me. That's the conclusion that I have to draw from this teaching, in terms of what? In terms of this reality here. And the only purpose of this teaching is to make life here better. Because you guys want to be happy here, that's all. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you come to Vedanta, that's the grease. The grease is you're free, you're fine. The teaching removes your squeaky. You stop squeaking, whining and complaining. Huh? Ishwar's a big mechanic. Huh? You just you drive in with your squeaky wheel, and he puts his load of grease on it, and off you go. No more squeaking. You're happy. You move smoothly through life.